So welcome everybody. This is the first of our new Turing Fellow introductory talks. So we've had a round of recruitments to the Turing Fellowships, and we've got a great bunch of new fellows who've just started this month. And will be familiarizing themselves with the Turing Institute, and I hope visiting London even once visiting is allowed again. So first speaker today is Dr. Tingting Mu. So Tingting is a senior lecturer in machine learning in the Department of Computer Science, and she is going to talk about representation learning, fundamentals, and applications. Over to you, Tingting.
Okay, yeah. Thank you very much, Magnus, for the introduction. And it's my pleasure to join the Turing family and to share my research with you guys today. And hello, everybody. Yeah. So, so first, I'm going to start from a bit what representation learning is. So usually in a machine learning pipeline, representation learning plays a very critical role there. So if you have some objects of interest you would like to analyze, and you start from collecting information on it, which can be either in data or in knowledge format. So in the later slides, we're going to talk a bit more about the difference between data and knowledge. So in order to construct a model that can learn from the data and the knowledge, and the first thing you will need to do is to convert it to representations that can be used as the input of a machine learning algorithm. And it's usually, and it's almost always, the quality of the representations you constructed will significantly affect the performance of the machine learning model in your targeted task. Okay, yeah. So the name of this area, representation learning, I think probably becomes popular after Banjo published their review paper on representation learning in TPME in 2013. So this is a big area, covers many classical research topics in machine learning field. So for example, feature extraction, dimensionality reduction, manifold learning, and embedding. More recently, neural representation learning. So approach-wise, what you can do about the encoding information is you can encode it as data points in a representation space, or geometric shapes in a representation space, for example, hypersphere here, or probability distributions. So our research on representation learning, it started from spectral embedding and projection pursuit. And later on, we moved to work on co-embedding relational data and learning binary strings to store video content efficiently. And we have also worked on neural network architecture design to mimic the attention and the memory mechanism to improve image representation learning. So if you're interested in this work, you're very welcome to read our paper. So here is a map of my research landscape. So under the big umbrella of the algorithm and the theory development area, so we have a list of research topics that we are interested in. So the motivations that drive our research include reduce the use of label, improve the model transparency, and to understand better and improve generalization. And so there are some like fundamental subjects that support our algorithm and theory research. And in addition to this algorithm and the theory development, we are also very keen on like applying our knowledge and the algorithms we developed to practical, to real world applications. For example, to provide a practical AI solution to automate a process or to construct a machine learning surrogate model to approximate some computationally extensive model, for example, some engineering model. And also we work on data analysis that analyze, find the patterns from text, image, and speech data. So you can see in the remaining of my presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit more on these three highlighted topics and also share a bit of our new results we have found in the theory of correlation factorization. Okay, so about data visualization. So the objective of this research task is to enable the user to observe and track the patterns in your high-dimensional data or relational data by embedding it into only a two-dimensional or a three-dimensional space. So the challenge of this research task is imposed by its natural setting, which is the dramatic reduction of your parameter freedom. So you can only use 2 or 3 coordinates to characterize each data point. So because of this, the information loss is just unavoidable. So when you cannot preserve all the information contained by your data, so you have to make a choice. So the question is, what patterns or data structures you will need to preserve, and also how to utilize the Euclidean geometry in the representation space to communicate the selected data patterns and structures. So a common approach in this field is to preserve local neighbor. So as shown in this single example, if you have a neighbor, you have identified ABC as X 3 nearest neighbor. And then in the new space, you would like to have ABC again to be your nearest neighbor. Okay, so this is a basic idea of local neighbor representation. But this approach can be problematic. It can lead to misleading visualization results due to a local vs global issue. So what we meant here is when you have an algorithm that can preserve pretty well your local neighbor structure, it is unnecessary. It can lead a truthful description of your global data structure. So we reported this issue in a paper we published in TPME in 2017. So we used a 3-dimensional Swiss raw data here. And you can see for the 2 algorithms, that is the second and the third column of the top figure. So you see the algorithm can preserve pretty well the neighbor preservation score, but it has pretty arbitrary global data structure. And then the algorithm in the right column, you can see it preserves pretty well the global structure, but unfortunately, its local neighbor preservation score is not very satisfactory. And then this same issue was also reported by another paper 2 years later, published in Nature Biotechnology. So they use the circular data as an example. So you can see the 4 figures on the right next to the circular data. So they have very different global data structure due to different settings they use for different algorithms. So how do we fix this problem? So we proposed a strategy to preserve, to improve the local and the global data structure preservation by simultaneously preserve the neighboring relationship, not only between data cohorts, but also between individual data points. So the idea here is very simple. So you have a point X, you have ABC as its neighbor, and then you have this data cohort 1, and then you have data cohort 2, 3, 4 as its neighboring cohort. So you want to preserve this neighboring relationship between points and between cohorts in the new space. Okay, so the idea is straightforward, but then in reality, when you are handling high dimensional data and also with data with fairly poor cohort separation, so to reach a good preservation accuracy is challenging. So there is a trade-off between the local preservation accuracy and the global preservation accuracy. And also many algorithms that is based on quite, how to say, elaborate optimization process that can affect computing speed. So what our algorithm development goal is to improve the accuracy and also to speed up the calculation. So currently, we're working on a visualization tool, which will include a website, a tutorial website, and also a visualization library to share our developed algorithm with the users. Okay, so the next is about hybrid learning from data and knowledge. So it's another topic we're interested in. So I'm going to start from like explaining a bit on what's the difference between data and knowledge by using a bird image classification example. So here you can see in this task, what the model is expected to do is when you have an input image, and then the model is supposed to tell you, okay, what is the bird type this image shows? So in this top right image, you can see it's a American crow, that's the bird type. So in order for the model to learn how to do that, you can feed the model data. So you feed the model data that is the example images of American crow. And then you can also feed the model knowledge. So that means that refers to what you have already know about how this American crow looks. So it, for example, it can be, so American crow is a subclass of bird. It has a black wing and also has a solid pattern. So the benefit and the motivation for us to do this is first, we would like to reduce the use of label. And the second, when we do annotation, it's quite often you will encounter mistakes in your label. So we would like to reduce the negative effect of mistakes in our label. And also another important motivation is we would like to improve our model's explainability. So by establishing a mapping between your data and the knowledge, so some selected knowledge will serve as the evidence of your data-driven black box model. So to do this, our main strategy is we are going to learn representation space and merge and map information there. So we demonstrate 2 example tasks here to show how we use external knowledge to improve the data-driven model. So the first task is to recognize human object interaction from images. So as you can see on the right image on the top, you see a human there, and the object interaction pair with will be the hug a cat. So this human is hugging this cat. So we work under the zero-shot learning setup. So this setup means when you recognize this interaction, you didn't, when you train your model, you didn't feed the model any label information regarding to that interaction. So to achieve this, so we construct constraints over the object and action pairs, use it as our knowledge. So we call it affordance graph. So that, for example, say if you focus on the action hold, so you can only hold a dog and you can hold a dog, a cat, and a ball. But then if you focus on the action, for example, hug, you can only hug a dog and a cat, but not really a ball. So these are the information we inject to the model, and it can greatly improve the zero-shot learning performance. And then the second task is the bird image classification task, which is the same one as we mentioned earlier. So what the setup we work under is few-shot learning. So we feed the model only 1 up to 5 example images for bird type. So what we did is we developed with our collaborator a bird ontology and extracted axioms from the ontology to describe different bird concepts. And then again, it improves the performance, and also it managed to produce some more semantically meaningful error. So that means when the model makes a mistake, it's a better mistake. Yeah. So in this, okay, next example is, here is the motivation I show this example here is I would like to share with you about some thinking process when we apply our knowledge or technique to solve a real world problem. So this is a KTP project. We work with a company, and then this company is on telephone call business. So they are interested in detecting vulnerability patterns from their telephone call data, and by jointly analyzing the audio signals and test transcripts. So in this project, the biggest challenge we have encountered is we don't have data. We don't have labeled data. So and there is no example data in their business context describing vulnerability pattern can be released to us. So what we have to do is we have to analyze the business needs and also their customer needs and also regulatory documents to manually formulate a vulnerability definition. And based on it, we collect information, which includes partially or indirectly related data and knowledge resource. And then based on that, we formulate a combined set of machine learning, speech recognition, and natural language processing tasks. And then when we develop a solution, we address two things. One is decision making, and the other is evidence extraction, because it's important for a business product that can make a decision, but meanwhile, it needs to flag to their customer why they make the decision. Okay, so the last example I would like to share with you is some of our results from our theoretical understanding on relation factorization. So we focus on, we're interested in an important representation learning family for relation data. So the way this family work is based on three-way matrix factorization. So basically, you are given a relation matrix here, and then you decompose it into the product of three matrices, A, S, B here. And then we call these three matrices A, S, and B as representations of the relation matrix. So why this algorithm operation is useful. So first, in reality, when you have relation matrix, you will not observe all the entries in R. You will have some missing entry there. And then this operation can help you to infer the missing entry. And also, so when your relation matrix is of low rank, so you can understand it as some data with less number of freedom. So you don't, but very large, like a relation matrix. So you don't need to store this data by storing every entries. So you only store the information by using ASB. And then when you have a small k, so the consumed memory space will be much reduced. And another benefit you have is you can analyze the patterns in your row and the column objects by analyzing your matrix A and B. So this is about the algorithm. So what we are interested in here is we want to establish some theoretical understanding of this family of algorithm. So we ask the question, so when you have this relation matrix generated by this ASB generative model, and then when you observed a set of entries, and then we ask, what patterns can you really recover from the matrix A and the matrix B? And so we have recently proved something new, which is not published yet, but I'm very excited to share you a flavor of this theorem. So we discovered that if you impose certain conditions on this generative model, which is not that difficult to be satisfied in reality, and then there exists an algorithm that can recover the positions of the non-zero elements in A and B with a probability at least P. And then this probability P, you can calculate it. So the usefulness of this theorem comes from, it can help you understand the role of sparsity in this three-way relation factorization model. Okay, so in the end, I would like to end this presentation by welcoming new collaborations. So as I mentioned here, these are the topics we're interested in. So far, when we develop algorithms and the techniques around these topics, we're looking at general algorithm design. But then to expand it, we really welcome to use the algorithm or develop an algorithm for some domain-specific high-impact application, so that we look at more domain-specific application-driven algorithm design. And also another thing is, when you improve the explainability of a model, it's quite challenging, or we can say it's probably ineffective to do it in a general sense. So it's not you have fixed a way to explain things for many different tasks. So we would like to work on more task-oriented explainability. And also we would like to investigate a bit more, research more on the role of human in a learning pipeline. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. I finished the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Tingting.
I hope I'm on time. Sorry about the mess in the beginning.
Thanks so much. Okay, so questions. You can either put them in the chat, or you can just unmute yourself and say something. Either way. And while we're waiting, I've got a couple of questions actually, Tingting. I was very interesting about the t-SNE, you know, and the other nonlinear.
Yeah, I say.
This is
yeah.
This is like a really hot topic in computational biology, but it looks like your work preceded this paper. But you might have seen recently there's been lots of debate about this, with Leo Pachter bringing out having a paper out recently on this topic. It's really caused a lot of controversy. So you've got a kind of workaround for this, and your workaround is to model both the local and the global distances.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Is cohorts, is that like a cluster, or what's a cohort?
Yes, you're right. So cohort here is mainly cluster structure. Okay. Yeah, so that's our current focus. But then you can expand on this, say, even including some topological structure, because the real global structure defined in geometry is actually based on topological. So as this cohort, they are only like a disconnected component, and then you can also discover the holes in the data, higher dimensional holes. So more topological characteristic may be able to like communicate it in a low dimensional space. Yeah.
So do you know under what circumstances there is a representation in a low dimensional space? So could it be that the structures, the global structures, just don't have a good two-dimensional representation? Because I suppose locally you usually think that the manifold might have some sort of low dimensional structure. Yeah. But globally, perhaps not.
Yeah, perhaps not. So yeah, I think theoretically, in that sense, that is, if we assume the data points distribute on a manifold, then what is the true dimensionality of that manifold? That matters. So if that manifold has a slightly higher, quite a high dimension, and then theoretically it has been proved you can embed it to a different space with even higher dimension, like a Whitney embedding theory. So basically, it could be in reality, perhaps you will never find a 2-3D dimensional space that can perfectly preserve your local and global structure, unless your original manifold's dimensionality is really, really low, like a 1 dimension or 2 dimension at 2 or 3, 1 to 3 dimension.
Have you tried your methods on any of these single cell biological data sets?
Yeah, actually, we're working on that. So we are running experiments on trying on those data. So it's the popular method for that is UMAP.
Yeah,
everybody is using it.
Yeah.
And then we're trying to like you apply our algorithm to the similar data they used, and then on a large scale to see how the performance is. And we're working on that. It takes time.
If you want some Manchester data, then my group and the core facility in biology, we're running these single cell experiments.
Ah, really?
So if you want to try some data that's actually live, then get in touch. I've got another question, because this week there's been a lot of attention about some problems in Google Summarize natural language, which stems from the difficulty of dealing with negative information in representations. And it's known from a while ago that BERT can have like 100% error rate on completion of negative statements. So for instance, using the concept that a robin is not a crow seems to be really difficult. So I was wondering if you have any ideas about representations that incorporate knowledge about negative relationships. Is that just a really difficult problem, or do you think there are any ways of getting around that?
Well, okay, so in our sense, so in our work here, I guess the non-negative relationship here we touched is, so when one concept is not related to the other concept. So this is really what we tried in this sense. And then what we did for that is we just, we model hyperspheres, n-dimensional balls for them. And so we would like to push them away. So they shouldn't intersect. But then so it's mainly, so if you want to address negative relations, so it's most likely you have to formulate it in your loss function. So if you use machine learning based approach, so if you don't directly formulate it in your loss function, well, I found it really, really hard for the model to learn it itself by feeding it maybe like partially related information or something can lead to this negative relation, but without telling the model this leads to this negative relation. I found it really challenging for the model to learn it itself. Yeah.
Thank you. We got a question. So someone's asking about whether the slides are available. Now, we've recorded the talk, but we can also, I guess, make the talk available, Tingting?
Yeah.
Or do you put talks on your website or anything?
Yeah, I can send you my file. Yeah.
Okay.
I will send you my file, and then maybe we can host it somewhere. Yeah.
Okay, we can maybe put it where we put the videos. Or
yeah.
We'll put them on the Insight website with the YouTube link.
Great, thanks a lot, Matthew. Okay, Tingting, thank you for that. That's great. And
great, thank you.
Our next talk is from Markel Vigo, who's a lecturer in health informatics. And Markel, do you want to share your slides? Great. And Markel is going to talk about methods, tools, and case studies for user interaction modeling. Over to you, Markel.
Yep. All right. You can hear me well, right? And you can see the slides.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, perfect. Right. Thanks, Magnus, for the introduction, and thanks to the Turing Institute for giving me the opportunity to share my work. Right. So, right. Yeah. So, my interest. I'm interested in understanding how users behave and how users use data-intensive systems. So, for me, a data-intensive system is something that gets very close to data, not raw data, but could be something like an information dashboard or health self-tracking ecosystem where you have the wearable, you have an app, you have a dashboard on a laptop, right? So very close interactions with data. And I want to understand how people interact with this data. And to do so, the goal of my work, more than focusing on those preferences, is to build tools and build systems to try to acquire this understanding, right? So I want to extract objective and actionable understanding. And when I mean objective, I want the understanding to be, I want the data, the interaction data, to tell me what's going on, as opposed to people self-reporting about what's going on, and actionable, right? I want that the knowledge acquisition I do to be actionable, so I can use it, and I can use this knowledge so I can inform the design of user interfaces, identify issues with the user interface and address them by fixing them. Also inform the design of digital health interventions. So sometimes you have a digital health intervention, an app for, let's say, manage diabetes. And probably the science behind managing diabetes is correct, but the wrapper, the container, the user interface around that intervention, it's rubbish, right? And the intervention doesn't work because the wrapper is not good enough, right? So I want to capture this kind of problems in real time so that I can do something later on. And I can also inform the design of workflows and data governance policies as well. But for this to happen, I also design pipelines that collect, store, transform, query, and analyze human-computer interactions. So if I want to acquire this understanding, I need to do all this, okay? So that towards the end, I just build computational user models that allow me to predict whether people are interested in using systems, whether people are engaged with these systems as well, whether there's interaction barriers, or whether people are learning as they interact with the systems, okay? So this picture at the bottom right, I mean, this is like the typical digital phenotyping picture you see everywhere, right? But my focus is in a human-computer interactions, okay? I don't specialize in sensor-driven data. So let me set the scope of the work, okay? I focus on low granularity interaction data, and we can define this by comparing it with the other types of data, interaction data. So you see this stack here on the left-hand side. At the bottom, we have the low granularity data. At the top, we have the high granular data. The high granular data is related to a goal or a problem. It's highly descriptive, okay? It tells you a lot of information. And the low granularity data it's not descriptive at all. It's very specific, and it lacks context, okay? Here at the top of the stack, you have indicators of explicit behavior. So someone is searching for a patient on a form, right, on a search engine, while low granularity data contains implicit behavioral markers, okay? Things that people do unconsciously, but are there in the human cognition, right? So I'm interested in this bottom part of the stack. This is basically because, you know, this kind of data contains behavioral markers that are indicators of cognitive processes. So, for instance, the location of the mouse cursor can tell me where people are looking at, and I can infer the attention of users on specific parts of the screen. Exploratory type of behaviors are indicators of whether people are engaged or not with an interactive systems. If I can observe someone scrolling down quickly, this may suggest that they are suffering from information overload, okay? And collecting this kind of events is easier compared to those at the top of the stack, right? So those at the top of the stack require you to typically instrument a software system, annotate it everywhere, while those at the bottom are kind of affordable to collect, although they have some challenges and caveats. And my goal in my research is to try to address all these challenges and make it this easy. And this kind of data collection is very useful for into the wild naturalistic studies, right? Where people are using a system for a long time. They might lose the awareness that they are taking part in a study as well. So it has high ecological validity. It's easy to recruit a lot of participants, although there's also some weaknesses that you cannot control for the tasks. And it's difficult to collect objective ground truth about the experiment or study you are conducting, okay? So the challenges I mentioned earlier, there's a very limited semantics associated with this kind of data, right? If you have a sequence of scrolls or key typing events, it means very little, right? Unless you do something about it. You generate a lot of noisy outputs, okay? If you scroll down with your mouse, it may generate like hundreds or thousands of scroll events that may constrain or determine a lot the analysis process later on. If you are following like a frequentist approach and you're trying to identify the most frequent patterns, scroll event may determine all the results, right? So you need to do something about it if you want to just so that the most interesting behaviors emerge to the surface. It's very difficult to formulate hypotheses. So you have some expectations about the system you have designed, and you want to see whether people are using it according to the expectations. It's very little you can do about it, right? And it's difficultly scalable because these low granularity events, I mean, you can generate millions and millions of data points. So in order to address these challenges, we developed a tool called Web Query. Let me do some shameless promotion. We got the Best Paper Award at the EICS conference in 2017, and a lot of work has been derived from this preliminary piece of work, okay? And what I'm going to present right now is something that targets people who may not be data scientists or may not be data savvy people, right? These people targeting, it's work targeting people at organizations that have access to data, but they don't have the skills to analyze the data, okay? This could be like user researchers, this could be information officers at NHS, for instance, okay? That's happened to me, that people have access to data, but they don't know what to do with that data because they don't have the skills. You could say they could hire a data scientist, but they don't, okay? So this tool aims at addressing these challenges, and while it is useful for all the populations, is more beneficial to those who are not data savvy, and makes data science more democratic, I would say. So the first problem was about limited semantics. There's very little knowledge in each data point, right? So we address this problem by including the interaction context at collection time. So here we have the participants of an experiment or a study who interact with their machines, who are connected to a web server, and we are extracting the data from their interactions, right? So this is how an event would look like. So typically, while you would have an IP and the event, so in this case, it's a most moved event, we collect also the coordinates of the event, the location on a website where this event happens, and so on and so on. So there's lots of contextual information you can extract, which at the same time makes the data analysis a bit more difficult, but you can also have views on this data. So you can treat this data point as a triple, right, of a timestamp, an event, and the location of the event on the screen. The second problem about having like noisy outputs and high cardinality, a lot of unique events, is addressed by giving tools for transforming, subsetting, and filtering the events. Okay, so here we have a user interface where users can select, not user, but user researchers can select from their data set the events in which they're interested in, and they can combine them. They can tell, I want only those events, like a mouse down and mouse up, that are triggered by a particular user interface event, okay? You can combine them, so you drag and drop here, and you create a customized event, an event sequence, let's call it. So for instance, I'm now creating a customized event here, which is about loading the window screen, the browser window, having like 2 mouse wheel events, and then having a click on a button, right? And I can also establish time constraints. So this should only happen in a time frame of 12 seconds. So extract all the events that meet these requirements. This is something you could do. You could subset, filter, and transform. So that later on, all these customized events that you have a catalog of customized events here, okay? And then what you can do is to visualize whether these events occur or not. So we call it hypothesis formulation, but basically what you are doing here is you're trying to see whether your expectations of use are being met, okay? And you have a catalog of customized sequences of events. And then what you can do is to make a selection of these customized events and put it through a pipeline of sequential pattern mining algorithms. So the output of these algorithms would be, those sequences of events that are most frequent. Okay. And we also address the scalability problem, because now running these queries and running these algorithms is computationally demanding. So if we incorporate here a MapReduce query engine, you could run this kind of queries on millions of data points on a just consumer laptop. Okay, and what you see here on the screen is the most frequent events, sequences of events of a query. Okay, just an example of that. Now, I could speak about this for ages, but I think it's more appropriate that if you are interested in it, you watch a video I put in here. The source code is available on GitHub as well if you want to extend and use web query. And we tested the system with, we evaluated the system with people who were not scientists, people who were user researchers. And the user study suggested that indeed by using this kind of tools, user researchers are able to extract more meaningful understanding from user interactions, and they can use this for different purposes, as I mentioned before. Okay, so we have the tools. Now I move into the methods. Okay, so here's a pipeline, very similar to the ones before. We have lots of users using interactive systems that they generate interaction logs, and we have the pipeline I mentioned before. So we have functionalities for filtering, transforming, hypothesis testing. You might use web query, but you may not if you're a data scientist and you're happy with your Python scripts or R and so on. Okay, and what I want to do is, because I said at the beginning, there's these latent behaviors are indicators of some other phenomena going on, right, with the person using the system and with the system as well. So I want to use these behaviors or these patterns of use as features of user models. Okay, so I want to generate a vector of features that derives from interaction data. And by using this pipeline with a tool or without a tool support, you can do this in an hypothesis-driven fashion. Okay, you may already know which kind of features you're looking for. Okay, I want this feature, I want this feature, I want this feature, and you are very selective here at every stage. Okay, and then you have like a very clean data set that you can analyze. Or it can be data-driven. Probably you have a very vague idea about that data, or you have no idea, and you're very lenient here at the pipeline. Okay, and you allow all the events to go forward, and then you apply sequential pattern mining, and the output of this sequential pattern mining will give you like the top most frequent behaviors that you can use as features. Okay, and therefore you would have a computational representation of users over time, because data is associated with timestamps, and therefore you can segment users by sessions or by periods of time. Therefore, if you are running like a longitudinal study of 1 year, you could create buckets of features. Okay, so here you have each column would be a profile of a user at a determined session. Okay, and therefore this computational representation, the matrix here, it would be like a fingerprint for a human-computer interaction of a determined user with a particular system. Okay, and then you can feed this matrix to machine learning algorithms that, if you know the class, you can apply supervised learning. If you don't know it, you can do unsupervised learning. I'll learn about it now. But there's even further challenges if you adopt the data-driven fashion approach, right? If you are like more exploratory and just trying to see what kind of features might be in the data, so maybe problems. And the problem is that the noisy outputs problem that we mentioned before, it's not gone, right? Because now you have pattern overload. So sequential pattern mining algorithms generate like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of patterns, especially when you have big data sets. Basically because some patterns are patterns of other patterns, right? And very minor variations of patterns also are understood as unique patterns. Now, I know that there's some sequential pattern mining algorithms that allow you to control these problems, but it's not 100% sure that you are not going to have noisy outputs, okay? And also, again, we still have some problem with the limited expressivity problem, right? We still have sequences of events associated with a timestamp happening in particular locations of the user interface. If you don't have a domain expert involved, it's very difficult to interpret the patterns, right? So you need someone there to try to understand what's going on. So two-step method here that involves humans in the loop in the pipeline in between the generation of patterns and generation of the features of the models. So we do further filtering by using this criterion. We want to maximize expressivity while reducing idiosyncrasy, meaning we want longer patterns, which means that the more long the pattern is, the more expressive or the more semantic knowledge it may contain, okay? And we want long and frequent patterns. Unfortunately, the most frequent patterns are the short ones due to probabilistic reasons. Therefore, you have to strike a balance here to make a choice of the patterns you want. And then you can do further grouping by doing, we said, why don't we do some kind of thematic analysis of patterns? It's something that you do typically on qualitative research with text or multimedia material. Why don't we give these patterns to user researchers and why don't they let them group them, right? Why don't they group the patterns and they come up with themes from these patterns, and these themes would become the features, okay? So let's have some coders in between that would analyze the patterns and tell us what the themes are, and the themes become the patterns. So what we're doing here, basically, if you remember the stack I mentioned before, where you have like a very low abstraction at the bottom and more abstraction towards the top, very specific at the bottom and very descriptive at the top, is that we are moving upwards, okay, on the stack by involving humans here. And this is about the pipelines and methods, okay? Now some case studies in which we use these tools and these pipelines, and oftentimes related to my research interest of human data interaction. So the first one is a medication safety dashboard. You see that it's like a very data intensive artifact where you can see data in a tabular fashion. And we just wanted to characterize the use of its users, okay? We had two types of users. We had clinical pharmacists and we had the secondary users of the tool, which were GPs or nurses and so on in the general practice. So we wanted to know whether there were behaviors that were characteristic of the users, right? And we generated some hypothesis-driven features. We applied supervised learning where the class was the type of user, okay? And we involved 35 people during a period of 10 months, right? And indeed, we found that primary users have a characteristic behavior of being quicker, spending less time on websites, and having a behavior which was of an less exploratory, okay? While the secondary users, those who were not clinical pharmacists and those that the intervention didn't target, they were like more of the behaviors were more exploratory, they were slower, and they used to dwell on pages that were targeting the other users, okay? So yes, we could detect who was using the tool almost in real time, okay? And this allows for interventions, okay? Because if you know the kind of user that is using your tool, you could make adjustments based on their profiles. Another interesting problem that we have tackled recently is about modeling behavior evolution over time, okay, over long periods of time. So the goal was to monitor search and exploratory behaviors in a longitudinal fashion on a search engine, okay? So we just developed a new search engine and we wanted to see how people who were new to this software would behave over time, okay, and how their behaviors would characterize their groups and their behaviors. And we can use some hypothesis-driven features derived from the knowledge acquisition, learning, and domain expertise literature. And we applied some unsupervised learning to see how the different cohorts behaved. Okay, so we involved 239 users over 20 months. One of the highlights about this work was that initially you have an heterogeneous pool of users who have very different behaviors. But over time, you see like a convergence. Okay, their behavior tends to converge. While you can see that there's, you can also capture the changes of individuals in between clusters. You see how there's like a tendency towards belonging to the bigger cluster. Okay, and that's because the behavior becomes more homogeneous. Another case study is, the following two case studies are on online learning. Okay, and online learning has been like a field of a study that has received a lot of attention in the last 5 years, especially in the last 2 years, right? And there's a lot of work done here. But here, typically the data granularity involved in this kind of studies is clickstream data, okay, which is just sequences of URLs. And in addition to modeling user behavior, we wanted to see what was the added value of low-level events compared to a high-level ones, like clickstream data. Okay. Now, in this one, we observed and we identified the engagement patterns of researchers on a connectivist MOOC over 4 weeks. We had 224 participants, and on a data-driven fashion, as we mentioned before, we got 130 activity patterns, which are the rows of this dendrogram, and the columns are all the users we had. Okay, so by applying unsupervised learning techniques like hierarchical clustering and so on, we found that by using this low-level approach, we don't only confirm with what the literature says about how people engage with MOOCs. So the literature says that there's like 3 types of users: those that complete, right? Those that engage from the beginning to the end and they complete the course. Those that are stronger starters, okay, their behavior or their engagement declines over time until just they drop, and those who don't engage whatsoever. Okay, but by using our approach, we were able to find more subtleties in the data. So we were not only able to understand what people do or how people navigate between resources, but what people do within these resources. Okay, what people do on the learning resources, in the forum, on the wiki, and so on and so on. And we were able to find a type of a strong starter that disengage over time, but at the same time, it also completes the course. Okay, so it disengages less than the profile that was known until now. And the final case study was about, can we do the same with, can we predict whether someone is going to be a high achiever in online learning, where achievement is measured by some badges given by a course instructor. So we derived some data-driven features, 23 of them. We applied supervised learning here, and we involved 193 students over a period of 4 weeks. And at the same time, we tried to compare what's the added value of these low-level patterns against the ones that are known, right, and out of a higher level. And what we found was that, by using this low-level approach, we could increase a 7% in the accuracy of in detecting whether students were not going to achieve a badge in the course. Okay, and this comes back again to the point I made earlier about making it actionable now. So we know now which are the behaviors which are indicators of not achieving a badge. So if we are able to capture these behaviors early on in the process, we can do intervention. So we can ping this user and tell them, look, you may not complete the course. Is there anything we can do for you? Okay, so that's what I mean when I mean actionable. So the concluding slide. I'll try to summarize the 3 blocks of the presentation. So I think I convinced you about that the low-level interactions are very useful and contain implicit cognitive markers that provide an added value, okay, to understand low-level interaction and to extract meaningful knowledge that can be actionable and used later on. Okay. Now, I think it also comes across that that doing so has a cost, right? It has a computational cost, has cost of involving humans in the process. But you can also mitigate these problems by providing tool support, okay, which doesn't address all the problems, but you know, it has a big coverage of existing challenges. And this is especially beneficial for those who are not data scientists, okay, and makes data science democratic for everyone and open. And the problems that remain are the opportunities that I have or you have to explore this problem space and probably intervene in those pipelines and have tools for interactive exploration of the problem space. Okay, and yeah, I'm happy to take any question right now.
Thank you, Markel. Give you a virtual clapping. So any questions, you can either just unmute and talk, or you can put something into the chat.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go for it.
Hi, Markel. I enjoyed that. Now, obviously, you are basing yourselves on mouse movement, but that's only part of the story. So how does your research relate to people that are using eye tracking to get an in-depth view of how user interfaces are used?
So, I mean, we have to use eye tracker in the lab, and it's something that belongs to the lab typically, right? So what we tried to do in the past was how can we approximate attention, right? And we did some studies by comparing eye tracking data against mouse behavior. And this is not a research of myself, but it's well known that you can approximate eye tracking data through mouse movement. So the point here is you can do it, and you can do it in an affordable way. I'm sure that you lose precision, but it's doable, okay? And if you do run this remotely. If I was in the lab and I had the eye tracker, I would use it. But if not, you can try to approximate it.
Oh, yeah, although, for instance, your safety dashboard showed a lot of occupancy at the top rows, which is where you click, but no occupancy at all at any of the bottom rows, which is where you look, I guess. Yeah,
I mean, that heat map belonged to another study, belonged to a lab study where we were trying to capture where people were looking at. So we were collecting the objective measurements. And then we tried to correlate these objective measurements with interaction data, right? And yeah, and you see that we call that the paint dropping strategy, where people fixate a lot on the top part of the tables. And there was a reason for that, and that was because if you click the header, that would rank, or that would sort the data underneath. So there was a lot of interactions with that, and interactions means fixations as well.
Thank you.
Any more questions for Markel? So I've got a question. So you're getting all this rich data about how the user is interacting with the interface, be it a web page or an app or whatever. To what extent can you then have adaptive interfaces that use the data from users to improve engagement? So you mentioned that this can give you hints of how to, you can flag things to the user explicitly, but can you also adaptively design the interface to improve engagement based on this kind of data that's coming in?
Yes, in theory and in principle, you could do so. And if you read all the papers belonging to this family of research, they all end up saying, oh, this allows for interventions and automatic adaptations. But you know what? Nobody does adaptations. And that's because it is extremely difficult to do, first. And second, because by doing adaptations, you may intervene in the interface in the way that wasn't expected, and you have to make people learn the new feature that wasn't demanded, right? So you have to do it in a very careful way.
And I guess you end up with a product that you can't debug. If you have something very adaptive, it becomes impossible to kind of deal with from an engineering standpoint.
Yes, but there is a compromise solution. So it doesn't have to be fully responsive or fully adaptive. You can't have a new release of the tool, right? That caters for everyone as well.
Okay.
And has minimal adaptations.
In terms of the education side, how widespread is the collection of data about engagement, and is it actually used in, you mentioned it could be used to predict how people are going to do, but is anyone actually using it as a measure now?
Well, we are using it in the university. There's a system for monitoring engagement of students, as far as I know, and we are starting this year. But Blackboard and Moodle and these platforms, they all allow for data collection. But the problem with these platforms is that the granularity of the data is very high, right? So again, you have clickstream data. You know to which resources students are going, but you don't know what's going on in those resources. So that's where our work, hits. We are addressing the demands of education researchers to provide them with low-level interaction data and do something about it. So data is being collected. I'm not sure if anything meaningful is being done with that data yet.
I mean, I love the focus on providing tools that you're doing, and just the, as you say, democratizing the access to the data for people is amazing. And I'm sure we'll have much more impact than just a specific study on a specific, application. So it's great, this infrastructure that you're building. I'm a huge fan of people doing this kind of thing. It's great.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't think we have any more questions, and I think we've run out of time. So thanks so much to Markel and Tingting. And I think on the ITSI website, you'll see the schedule for the rest of these. They're a bit kind of broken up because we've got some Turing sandpits happening in the next couple of months. So these talks are kind of in between. So it's a bit hard to predict when they are. You have to look on the website and see, but I hope to see lots of people there. It's a good audience today, and I hope there's a good audience for the next ones. And thank you to the speakers, and bye-bye, and see you, everyone.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.